So I wanted to make a quick video to be able to kind of just refresh us on how to use our calculator when we're trying to input matrices. So I have two matrices that we're going to be working with. I've got a 3x3 and then a 3x1. So when you want to be using your calculator for matrices, we first need to be able to pull up the matrix menu. To do that, if we look on top of our inverse button, so the x to the negative first power, you'll see it says matrix. So to call that, we need to press second and then that inverse button. That pulls up your matrix menu. You see that you've got three pieces to it. The names, which we're going to use when we want to actually use the matrices. Math we really don't use too much in here. And then edit. This is the place we need to come first to be able to actually put a matrix into our calculator to then be able to use it. So I'm going to start with my 3x3 matrix. So I'm going to input that as matrix A. So I'm going to make sure that I've got that highlighted under the edit menu and then press enter. And it brings me to this screen, which is where I input my matrix. So the first thing you need to do is put in the dimensions for the matrix that you're working with. So since this is a 3x3, I'm going to type in a 3, press enter, 3, and suddenly your calculator has created the space for you to input a 3x3 matrix. So I can go number by number, inputting my 1, and then pressing enter. You'll notice that it's going to go across your rows when you're inputting, so just make sure that you're following that pattern with the numbers that you were given. So I'm going to do that for all of the numbers that I've got here. Make sure when you are doing this, you're being careful not to miss any negatives. That's the biggest way that I see people make mistakes when they're using their calculator. Now, once you've done all of your numbers, you'll see it'll bounce you back to the first number. At this point, I like to double check my work just to make sure I didn't miss a number, I didn't type something in wrong, just a good check for yourself. Once everything seems set, to get out of this menu, because if you try to back up, use clear, you're just going to get caught within it. Above the mode button, you'll see the word quit. That's something that you can use to get out of any program in your calculator. So we can press second and then mode. That puts me back to the main menu. So now if I want to use that matrix, I'm going to go back to the matrix menu. So second, inverse. And now you'll see under my names column, I have a 3x3 matrix listed. That's the one that we just created. If I want to use that matrix, I'm going to highlight it and press enter. Now you'll see that that matrix is sitting in our calculating screen. So now we can multiply numbers by it. We can find the inverse of it, anything that we're going to need to be able to do with our calculator. So in this case, I'm going to find the inverse. So I'm going to go back to that inverse button I keep using and press it. So now we see we have a to the negative first power, which is our sign for inverse. So once I have that set, all I have to do is press enter. And suddenly I have my inverse. Now that looks really messy with all of the decimals. We can't even see all of the pieces of our matrix. So what I like to do is I change it to a fraction. So how we can do that is we go to the math menu, which is right below alpha. So math, and you'll notice that first option, FRAC. That is how you can take any decimal in your calculator and turn it into a fraction. So I'm going to press enter for that, another enter, and suddenly we have our inverse all in fraction form. So that's easier to handle when we're working with it, easier to write down when we're trying to show our steps. So my suggestion is to always get it into fraction form. Now we can also multiply matrices. If I go back to my matrix menu, so second and inverse, I'm going to add a second matrix. So I'm going to go down to B in my edit, and I'm going to add this 3x1 matrix that I have created here. So I have a 3x1 with 2, 9, and -1. So again, second mode, it's going to get me out of my menu, and I'll clear our screen for us. So now if I want to multiply these together, I know dimensions-wise, a 3x3 times a 3x1 means I'm going to have to multiply them in this order, because if I swap it, my dimensions aren't going to work. So in my calculator, I'm going to go to my matrix menu, and I want A times, I'm going to go back and pull up my second matrix. So we have A times B, and we can see what we end up with right away. You can do this for any of our solving equations, for finding inverses. Anytime that we don't specifically say find this by hand, you're able to use your calculator. So hopefully this helps give us the refresher that we need of where all of the pieces are going to be on our calculators.